Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from June 11th, 2021. I'm recording this a little early this week on Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. As always, I give those dates so you know when this information is most relevant because the market's always moving and changing. So what I say today for prices may not be relevant when you watch this a week, 2 weeks, a month from now. So as always, also, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. They each put out a list of 10 books that were hot for that particular week for whatever reason. So we do this look back to see what made these books hot, what's happened since. Would you have been better off being patient on the books? Most of the time, yes. But why? What factors actually were able to sustain books, which against what factors actually caused them to drop back. So we got 18 books this week. Let's look at these 18 books, see if we can learn anything. And all right, here we go. First up, we have God Country #1. This hit the list because it was announced that Sweet Tooth showrunner, so the guy that had worked on the Sweet Tooth show, was signed on to direct this movie. Raw copies were going for $60. 9.8 hit 350. Now raw copies are going in the $50 to $100 range, so they're still mostly 50, 60-ish, but occasionally it's going 80, 100. 9.8, so have dropped back considerably, 150 to 225, but most of the sales are on the raw side. I call this one steady overall. It's kind of in the same range, particularly on the raw side, down quite a bit on the 9.8 side, but overall, steady. I'll be back is kind of where I went with this one. We're moved away from any news. We're away from actually getting a movie, so that's kind of why it falls where it does. Next, we have DC Comics Presents #47. This hit the list because it is obviously the first appearance of He-Man and Skeletor in comics, but it hit the list because we had a trailer drop for the animated show that's already been out for a while. 9.8 went for $3,500. Now raw copies are going for 100 to 200, with 9.8 sitting around 12 to 2,000. Most part more closer to the 2,000 side, but there was actually a sale recently for, I think actually the most recent sale was all the way down around 1,200. But yeah, so this book is definitely backed up quite a bit. Didn't really stay there. I know the show got very mixed reviews. I haven't ever watched it, but I know it got very mixed reviews. Some people really liked it, but a lot of people didn't. So next we have Sweet Tooth #1. We talked about it, showrunner signing on for God Country. Well, this show was out at this point. It was, a bunch of people had really enjoyed it. So the prices had jumped on the book. Raw copies were up to $180. 9.8 hit 1,000. This book in 6 months since we had the show, has already dropped back. Raw copies are down around $30 to $90. 9.8s are down around $300 to $500. Significant backup. Definitely turned this one into a trap in just 6 months' time from the release of the show. It shows you that it's hard to sustain these things. That really, avoid trailers, avoid show releases for buying these comics because they are definitely the worst times. Next, we have Red Thorn #1. This was announced that they're working on a series for BBC Scotland. Raw copies were going for 15 to 35. Now raw copies are going for 1 to 5. This turned into a dumpster fire. Just no sustained interest in it at all, despite being its second week in a row on the list. But it was on opposite list, so it was really the same prices as the previous week. So next, we have Stray Dogs #1, the Staniak Blair Witch homage variant that was limited to 500. So this is a homage to the Blair Witch Project movie poster. Raw copies back then were going for $160. 9.8 was hitting $450. This one is actually up. Raw copies now cost you $150 to $250, with most of the sales being around $200. 9.8s are going for $400 to $800, with more sales toward the $800 end than the $400 end for sure on that. So definitely this one has continued to move. There's been a lot of buzz about this series. A lot of people are interested. We recently got news, I think, that they're going to do like another series in this world, maybe like not the same dogs, but not 100% sure on that. But I did get that there's going to be more coming from this Stray Dogs world, so we'll see. But so far, this definitely has jumped up in price. Next, we have Nice House on the Lake. Number 1, the John Gallagher variant. Last week we had one of the special limited edition covers on here, or the 1 in 25, I guess, was on here last week. This week, just this regular John Gallagher variant. Raw copies of this were up to $60 to $70. Now they're 30 to 50. 9.8s are 80 to 150. So this definitely turned into an I'll be back. There was a lot of series buzz as this was coming out. A lot of people were interested. People are still talking about a lot. I know people are liking this series quite a bit. It is currently on hiatus, so that may be part of, like, people knew this was coming. People have backed off the series a little bit. We'll see if it has any kind of bounce back here going forward, but definitely it's been an I'll be back. Better time to chase this than when it was first coming out. Next, we have Web of Spider-Man, number 1. This is the Mark Bagley 1 in 25, but the reason this hit the list is because it's the first appearance of Harley Keener. If you don't know who that is, if you ever saw Iron Man 3 and the kid in there, that was that kid's name. They brought him into the comics here with this book finally. Raw copies are going for $150 back then. Now, there's only been one sale since October 5th of it, like Raw slabbed anything and it went for $40. Raw's were going fairly consistently for $100 plus back in September. 9.8 did go for $180. Listings are currently all like 80 and above, but people are not interested in the last couple months in this book. This has definitely turned into a trap. Actually, really a dumpster fire is for how much down it is and how little sales there are. So definitely not a lot of sustained interest at this point for this character. We'll see if they use him enough that it actually becomes something. I think it was a little bit of novelty. Hey, he's going to be in the comics, and people over splurged on this one a little bit, but we'll see. Next, we have Black Widow number 6, the second print, 1 in 25, Elena Casagrande design variant. This is obviously the first appearance of Lucy Nguyen, who is the designed character on this cover. Raw copies of this were going for $80 to $100 back then because there was a lot of buzz that this character was going to be important. I do find her, I've been really enjoying the Black Widow run. I find her to be an interesting character with a little potential. We'll see what they do with her. But this book has backed up considerably. It's now a $20 to $25 book. There was one 9.8 sale that went for $150, but this has definitely also been a bit of a dumpster fire. It is definitely, if you were paying $90, it's now a $25 book. Down around ratio. So yeah, definitely not something that you've gotten your investment back on. It would have been better waiting until some of the buzz around the character cooled off. Next, we have We Live, number 1. This hit the list because it was nominated for an Eisner, and this was already a fairly popular book, but a lot of sales with the Eisner nomination. Raw copies were up to $40. 9.8 was going for $230. This one's still 25 to 50, so they're occasionally still going in that $40 range, but definitely overall down a little bit. 9.8s have definitely backed up. They're more of a 1 to 150 right now. So this is definitely overall down, a bit of an I'll be back. Everyone says a great series. This is one that's on my list to try to get to, hopefully in 2022. Get this one read and get caught up on this because I've heard a lot of great things. Next, the rest of the list, we're kind of moving into like MCU spec, some pretty good, some kind of random. So there's 9 books left, all MCU spec related. First up, we have Alpha Flight number 1. This is the first kind of titled team book for Alpha Flight. They'd obviously appeared before this, but this was their first book as a team. Raw copies of this were going for $10. Okay, but 9.8 hit $450. Now raw copies are 10 to 30. Like really nice copies are more in the $20 to $30 range. 9.8s have backed up to $300, but there's very few sales of like a 9.8 of this book. For the most part, it is vast majority of sales are those raw copies. But this kind of is a trap because we probably weren't going to get any news on Alpha Flight for a long time, and we haven't. But there has been enough renewed interest that this is kind of up and worth it. People have realize, hey, this is a minor key, and people are actually willing to spend the $20 or $30. So this one is actually overall up after this buzz. Next, we have Hawkeye #1 from 2017. This is the first solo series of Kate Bishop as Hawkeye, but it's also the first appearance of Ramon Watts, who's apparently a character that people think might be a part of the America Chavez show that we're supposedly getting. So that was part of why it hit the list, as well as the run-up to the Hawkeye series, which is obviously coming out right now. Back then, raw copies were going for $20 to $40. A 9.8 hit $330. Now it's $20 to $30 for raw copies. 9.8s are down to around $125 to $200. This is with the show actively coming out, so this is kind of an opposite end. This was trailer and other stuff, potential other character spec that have pushed this book up. Hasn't even been able to sustain that with the show currently going on. So, so this one definitely turned into an I'll be back. And it tells you if we get past the show, this might even become even lower, more easily attained book if you're still looking for it. Next, we have Submariner #1, his first Silver Age solo appearance. Basically, people were going nuts over this book. Rumors that Subby is going to be a part of the Black Panther 2 movie. Basically, was hitting all-time highs across all grades. It's basically what CBSI put on their list. They didn't give any actual prices. I had to go look. I didn't put any prices down, but I went and looked at like Go Collect and other things to see where the trend has went. And this book is actually down, and I'll be back. Basically, I think the spec plus the craziness of the spring puts this book really, really high. It has definitely corrected some. It's still up, probably overall from where it was this time last year, but down from the craziness of the spring. Currently, raw copies will be anywhere from $200 to $1,200 depending on conditions. So really nice copies are up around $1,000. Low grade copies are around $200. Obviously, everything else is in between. 6.5 will cost you $500 to $600 on this book, but in a 9.4 will cost you about $2,400 right now. Both of which are down from where they were back in the spring. So next we have Fantastic Four #33. This is the first appearance of Atuma. I think that's how you pronounce him. Kind of a villain of Submariner, but also appeared the first time here in this Fantastic Four. Another character people were speculating on might be part of Black Panther 2. Raw copies back then were going for $615. A 9.2 hit $1,300. Now raw copies are like $50 to $150. So I'm not sure. Sometimes Tom, when they give their raw average prices, they're not very clear about exactly what they're evaluating that on. Obviously, that obviously had to be pretty high grade stuff that they got an average of $615. Maybe that was more of a high raw sale. I don't know, but typically they say it's an average. But raw copies now are like $50 to $150. Even really high grade stuff, $150-ish. The highest graded sale recently was a 7.0 that went for $680. Which sort of indicates that maybe actually graded copies are up a little bit, but since the vast majority of sales are those raw copies, I put it as a down and an I'll be back. Maybe even more of a trap, but it's hard to know. Again, I'm not sure what that $615 price just seems a little odd for an average sale, so I didn't really put this as a trap, but maybe I should have. We'll see. Next, we got Fantastic Four #352. First appearance of Mobius. Second cameo of the TVA. First appearance of the Minutemen. So this had everything to do with the Loki show. Raw copies back then were going for $5. Lots of sales. Again, one of those lots of sales, but not really a price bump that Tom put on the list. Now, and a 9.4 hit $75. Because there's not a lot of graded copies of this particular book. Now raw copies are costing anywhere from $1 to $15. The most recent 9.4 sale was around $50. 9.8 sale was $285. So back then I put worth it, and that's kind of where it's at. It's been pretty steady on the raw side. Some interest in Mobius, but not a lot. I think this book actually jumped as the series went on. I think this will hit the list again and be higher than this. But now it's basically, it's still in that same range. Next, we have Thor #5, first appearance of Lady Loki. This was anticipation of getting a female version of Loki. Raw copies were going for $40 to $50 back then. We didn't actually get this version of female Loki. We got with Sylvie, who is kind of a different character from the comics. So that's why this book has dropped back. It's now a $5 to $30 book, turned into a bit of a trap, because it's not really the same kind of version of female Loki. But anyway, the show was a hit, and a lot of these books are backed up anyway, just because. So, Thor Annual number 18 also hit the list because of rumors of a female Loki. This is the first cameo of female Loki, I guess. You're like, well, that was 93, and the first appearance was until 2008. They kind of call this a cameo because in one panel, like basically there's a page where Loki is shape-shifting into all these different forms and versions of himself, appearances, and he turns into a female in one of the panels. That's why they called this a cameo. So people were chasing this $10 to $35, which is a pretty good range on that. Now it's kind of a $5 to $20 book. So definitely turned into an I'll Be Back. So overall down. Just kind of a strange, yeah, he did it in this one panel. It wasn't like truly female. He just took on the appearance, used his, his ability to manipulate things to look like he was female. So anyway, next we have Thor number 364. This is sort of the first appearance of Throg. Basically, this hit the list because there was a picture of a Lego minifig that was Throg, basically a frog Thor. People went after this book that was coming. The thing is, this is not actually Throg in the comics. This is Thor gets turned into a frog, but later he meets a frog while he's in that form, and later that frog picks up a sliver of Mjolnir and becomes Throg. But that's in a later book. So people call this the first Throg. I don't know. It's a kind of a screwed up weird thing. But anyway. Back then, because of this minifig, people were paying $25 for this. 9.8 hit $495. Now raw copies are $15 to $30. 9.8s are $225 to $275, which is kind of where they had been before there was any buzz and, just in general, which is pretty good for the first Throg. But anyway, this definitely turned into an I'll Be Back. Last book of the week. Avengers number 8, first appearance of Kang. Obviously, we knew we were getting a version we knew the actor had been cast as Kang, and we were getting a version of him in the Loki show. At this point, we didn't know exactly what that was going to be. Graded copies were hitting all-time highs and a lot of grades. 4.5 was up to 1,200. A 3.5 was at 850. A 2.5 was at 650. And basically, those books are at least at those grades, are all basically in that same price range right now. 7 to 900 for a 3.5, 6 to 700 for a 2.5, 17 for a 4.5. Raw copies will run you 3 to 600 in kind of that low to mid grade condition. Like a really high grade thing will cost you a lot more than that. But there's not many of those out there. I thought this might be straight cast, but really we're kind of in the lull. Kind of like we've seen with several characters. We're not going to get Kang again for a while, so this book is, now this, unlike a lot of them that have backed up, this is just kind of maintained and stayed steady. This was always a big book anyway, so it's just kind of been worth it. It's maintained these new prices, but it hasn't really continued to climb. So that is this week's list. We had 13 of our 18 books that went down in value, 3 that were pretty steady, and 2 that actually went up, which is actually a pretty close to the typical percentage on these. So yeah, definitely, once again, for the most part, you're much better off if you're just patient. So I have the wrap-up slide in a second. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.